gentlemen, non-binary folk, and everyone in between, welcome back to Season 2 of Wholala!
Woo, 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 yeah.
Bow, 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 bow.
Boom, 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 boom. Oh my God, Sam.
Well, I woke up today, and the words... No, I'm not going to go into my
I'm going to. How are you, my love? I haven't spoken to you in like 25 minutes or something.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty well. It's been a busy old week, you know. We took a week off, but it really wasn't a week off. We've been scurrying around.
I know. We have. Everyone who's listened to this, they're like, oh, that whole week off must be so fully rested. I'm like, honey, we're like crawling across the corridor.
Oh, honey,
like
we dragged ourselves up to the mic.
But I am very excited to be here with my bestie, talking about my favourite thing in the whole world, Doctor Who.
Oh, Doctor Who. And if you thought this was a podcast about anything else, nope. Sorry, it's a queer Doctor Who podcast.
Mm-hmm. If this is your first time listening, hello, welcome, hi. My name's Sam and this is Alasdair.
Hello.
And we are two besties who love talking all things Doctor Who, exploring old episodes, looking on different topics, and we, especially being two little queer boys, we love looking into LGBT history of the show and exploring the queer fandom.
Yes, absolutely. We're reclaiming our youth and we are going deep into our favourite thing in the world, Doctor Who.
There you go. And it is a cracker today. We thought, what else could we do to start the series of the band? Because there's some differences from season 1 of Wholala. We are not going linear through a series of Doctor Who. We did go through series 1 of Doctor Who in the past season of Wholala, which I loved, properly exploring Christopher Eccleston's tenure. But time is a big ball of wibbly-wobbly time-wimey stuff, and we're hijacking our TARDIS to second gear, and we're going to be exploring a multitude of different episodes, jumping from classic to New Who to celebrations to spin-offs. And Alasdair, what is a better way to start off season 2 of Wholala?
Yes, we are taking the handbrake off the TARDIS. We are free from the shackles of 2005, though we did enjoy our stay, and we are now zip-zapping all across the universe. We felt the right place to start in the 60th anniversary year is with a 50th anniversary special. 10 years ago, the day of the Doctor hit our screens, and what a moment.
What a moment. You know, to quote our Queen Charlotte XCX, let's ride.
Let's ride. It's an interesting place to jump in because I have very fond memories of this episode, and I did a rewatch on the weekend. My flatmate was there, and I was a little bit of a hater. I don't mean to be. We've branded this whole thing as a very positive and happy space for Who fans, and I was really feeling quite negative actually about it. I have a number of criticisms, and I'm relying on you today to help me bring out some of the things that we loved because it was a celebration.
So you're like, I'm gonna be a hater, and you need to try and bring out some joy in this episode.
You need to be the antidote to that today.
I will say this: I have got a lot of highs for this episode too. I do get what you mean. It feels, especially coming after series 1 of Doctor Who, which I feel like is such a powerhouse of like incredible writing, incredible acting, concise stories. I think that then jumping into this, it was a little jarring, not gonna lie. But there is a lot of fun to be had with this episode as well. it still has such fond spot for me.
So let's talk about context.
This episode was made as the celebratory special for the show's 50th anniversary. There were also 2 minisodes that were released before this episode. There was The Night of the Doctor and The Last Day. The Night of the Doctor, in many ways, I love as much as this special. It was a surprise return of the 8th Doctor, Paul McGann. It showed us how he regenerated into the next Doctor, which we all, up until this point, would assume was Christopher Eccleston, including Paul McGann, I believe, until Stephen Moffat said, no, there was John Hurt in the middle. And The Last Day was focusing on the Time Lords, leading into the final battle of the Time War, which sets up the Day of the Doctor.
Yeah. So there was a lot of excitement on this year. I was still in my hardcore Doctor Who fan phase at this point. I don't know if you'd let it go at this point, but I was still clinging on for dear life.
Oh, no. I saw this through and then some. I was definitely like hardcore on board.
Yeah, I remember, like, at the time, my then girlfriend really was not a Who fan, and I was like, this will convince her, like, oh, this will win her over, like, she did not, let me say, like it after this, but I remember, like, so many people had dropped off from watching Doctor Who when Matt Smith joined, and I was like, this will win them back, this will get them, and I really believe this was, like, the whole redemption of the show, and that everyone would, like, finally understand how big a deal Doctor Who was, and I don't know that totally came to fruition.
I feel like you know what it did really well? It really built up a hype for the show again, because I agree with you. I think that it kind of weaned a little bit, and I can't say with certainty that they did get the audience back with the way they wanted it to, but they really hyped up. They made a gorgeous anniversary style trailer, like a teaser trailer for this episode, but it was more just sort of celebrating what happened before, where they like imposed images of all the different doctors and various companions. There was also a lot of fan trailers at the time. I know that John Smith on YouTube, he made amazing teaser. Once he'd seen some of the filming photos, he like edited together this teaser trailer that I fully was like, this could be the real trailer. I love it so much.
Did you fall for it?
I think I did. I think I did at first. Well, it was just so well done. I was like, oh my God, this has to be real.
I know exactly the one you mean, the fake trailer.
Yeah.
And it got a few people. I'm too smart for this. My media literacy is too high, so I always knew it wasn't real.
There were a couple shots where I was like, I'm pretty sure that's an image of David Tennant from another episode, but I digress.
I'm pretty sure that's a 2D image of his shoulders like bouncing to make him look like he's walking down a corridor. There was a lot of other pieces in place for the 50th. The Five-ish Doctors was a really funny comedy special, written by and directed by Peter Davidson.
Yeah, it was amazing. I like, at the time, I was like, oh, what a silly little, funny side piece. But then in rewatching it recently, I was like, this is actually like, I like this as much, if not more, than the Day of the Doctor.
Oh my God. Completely. It's aged incredibly well. It's really funny. It's cut well. It's funny. I mean, it's like filmed on an iPhone, but it's really good. You had to be there. It was the age of YouTube, of YouTubers specifically.
Exactly.
There was also the notorious The After Party, which is like the most chaotic thing. That probably warrants its whole other bonus episode for us to rewatch The After Party, because it sends me every time I see that.
I genuinely would love to. It's just baffling to what, like, it is baffling.
They take my girl Katie Manning and they sit on her at one point. They have that live stream as well with One Direction. But what was happening? Was it like...
It was a super bad delay. So I remember it was Zoe Ball trying to speak to One Direction while she had like live in the studio guests. And there was like, because they were in the States, and I think there was genuinely like a 60-second delay.
There was a 60-second delay.
Yeah. And she'd try asking them something and they'd like reply a minute later and she'd moved on. It was just chaos.
And then it just kept looping back like more and more and more aggressively as time went on. Anyway, it was incredible. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend you go on YouTube. There'll be some compilations of the most chaotic moments. It's so good. But this episode was huge. The 50th, I think, like, fan speculation was running wild as well about what would be in it. In the end, it was streamed in 94 countries, and it was screened as well, bizarrely, in 3D, because I think that was the cool thing at the time.
Yeah.
There were 3D TVs that were being sold at that time. I think that kind of trend died off. I remember like Sky 3D was
there was a huge move. They thought it was going to be like the future of television, and then everyone realized it was just like a gimmick that we didn't need.
I've been new because I've always thought 3D sucks. But
you're just fully ahead of the trend all the time, my darling.
Always. And it was streamed across, Latin America, North America, Europe. And it was such a big international simulcast that it broke the world record, according to Guinness World Records.
That's crazy. I saw it on TV with everyone else, but I always wanted to go to a cinema and see it, because I know they had a lot of exclusive cinema-only little, like, shorts before, where they'd have, like, videos with Matt Smith and David Tennant, and, like, weirdly, Strax, the Sontaran, had loads of, like, shorts before, who, like, doesn't feature anywhere in the episode. That was a weird one.
Yeah. The other thing that I would have loved to get is just be with an audience for the experience of it. I really, really regret. There was an event, I can't remember what it was called. I don't know if it was called like the Doctor Who Fan Celebration or something along that line.
Yeah.
But there was this huge convention basically at the Excel, which went on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Saturday was the day it aired. And it was this huge fan event. I think I went on the Friday, I went on the Sunday. I went after it'd been on, which was still a great day to go.
Well, if anything, it's better because they could actually talk about it.
Yeah. And I think that's what our thinking was, is that like we might as well go when they're not kind of pretending they,
can't say anything
in it and stuff. Yeah. And that was such a good event, because it was like part exhibition, part normal Comic-Con style thing, and they also did screenings. So on the night of the 23rd, they streamed it on the big screen for a huge audience, and I wish that I'd been there for that, or indeed that any footage survived of that reaction.
I haven't seen any of it. I can only imagine like a sort of like MCU style when you're in a cinema watching like Endgame or something, like being in a room full of Doctor Who fans watching like the 50th. We should see if there's something like that for the 60th.
Well, I'd love to know genuinely. I mean, if anyone listening attended that by chance, I'm so curious to know like what the atmosphere was like whether it was just people sitting silently and watching, or if it was kind of a more of an explosive cheering thing when all the Doctors come back. Spoiler. And speaking of spoilers, shall we summarize the episode?
Yes, of course. So, in celebration for the show's 50th anniversary, we travel across space and time in the Day of the Doctor. The 11th Doctor and Clara are summoned by UNIT to investigate strange happenings in the National Gallery that turn out to be a Zygon invasion dating back to the Elizabethan era. The 11th Doctor travels back there where he meets his 10th incarnation, while the elusive War Doctor is planning to use a weapon called the Moment to destroy Gallifrey and end the Time War, but the Moment has a conscience of its own, presented in the form of the Bad Wolf, looking very similar to Rose Tyler. It sends the War Doctor back to meet his future self, and together we now find 3 Doctors. Once learning of the man he will become and knowing his future is in safe hands, he asks the Moment to bring him back to Gallifrey to end the war. 10 and 11 travel back to the present day and create a peace treaty with the Zygons and the humans, and they then use their respective TARDISes to enter the Time War and help the War Doctor do what must be done. However, with a little help from the Moment, they realise they can instead seal Gallifrey in a moment in time and save them all instead of destroying the planet. To do this, they call on the help of every one of his incarnations, both past and future, in order to seal the planet. The 3 Doctors then say goodbye to each other once the deed is done, each of them unsure if it actually worked. While pondering on their hopeful success, the 11th Doctor meets the curator of the gallery, who appears to be an older version of his 4th incarnation, and he is told that while he never forgets a face, he may start revisiting a few of the old favourites. We leave the Doctor dreaming of his planet, hoping one day to find it again.
Ooh, good summary.
I will say this, writing that recap was really difficult because this plot jumps around so much and if I'm quite honest, doesn't make sense at times. So I was like, how do I summarize this in like 2 paragraphs?
I have so much to say about this plot and I'm so keen not to become a hater. I really am not, because I did adore this at the time and I rewatched it many times afterwards and did love it then. But this story makes no damn sense. I get it. I understand it. It's not an issue with me like not being like able to compute it. I've read the novelization. It doesn't make any damn sense.
There's just, I think, too many moments where something will happen. And I do think this is a bit of a criticism of Stephen Moffat's writing in general. And hey, I'm not a Stephen Moffat hater. Love the 11th Doctor's era. But there are often times, it's really clear in this episode, where they just need to get from point A to point C and they kind of skip over point B and either assume the audience will get it or just accept it. So like a little thing like Clara being able to use the vortex manipulator without like even knowing what it was before 2 seconds ago. You know. We'll
get into it because there's quite a few points I want to pull up that specifically I take issue with, and also I'm going to try and be constructive. I'm not just going to whinge. I'm going to suggest how they could have been fixed. And, you know, I'll allow as well, you know, sometimes there's things like time constraints in the writing process. I know there was a lot of confusion as well with this one about kind of who was even going to be in it. And I know that he had to work on several versions, one where there were no doctors. There was one where there was only one doctor. So I know there was like, you know, it was a really difficult thing to write. I think just knowing even who was going to be in the final episode. So I'll try and be forgiving for that.
Exactly. Well, why don't we jump in with some of our highs for the episode? Because I do actually have a bigger list of highs than lows, I find.
Go on then. Let's go for highs.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to sort of like go back on what I just said a little bit, because I did love how in a sort of celebratory anniversary special, we weren't just tied into one place. I did like how it spanned across different locations and periods and times. We had like present day London, Elizabethan England, we had Gallifrey, and much as I feel like the plot could get sticky, I do like that we weren't stuck in one place. We were exploring lots of different places. I know there was a bit of contention online about this. I liked that they brought the Zygons into this episode. I thought that they were a classic villain that was long overdue a comeback, and I think something like an anniversary special is a really good time to sort of bring back a fan favourite villain that like hadn't been in the show, the revival of the show up until that point. So I do like that we, you know, got to spend a bit of time with some Daleks, got to spend a bit of time with some Zygons, and they weren't pushed together in a way that has happened in other episodes where, like in The Power of the Doctor, for example, we need the Master, the Daleks and the Cybermen all in one episode, so they have to work together, whereas I feel like they treated them like almost like two separate plots. Like the Daleks are over there doing this and the Zygons are here doing that, and I quite like that.
Yeah, I agree with you fully on the time periods. I really liked how it jumped around. That's one I didn't even think about. I do think it's important that it feels kind of big in scale. And actually, I think it's good that it stuck to 3 because what's happened in other kind of Moffat finales is it's gone to like 7 locations and it starts to get really overwhelming. And I think 3 was a nice mix, kind of present, past, and not future, but kind of off distant world.
Space.
Yeah, space. And I think that was quite easy to kind of understand kind of the locations of those things. That worked really well.
Completely.
Zygons, I instinctively don't love, but maybe I'm prejudiced and I just need to accept that.
What is it you didn't love about them?
I just don't like the Zygons. How can I go any deeper into that? I wish I could explain in more detail why, and it's really pathetic that I can't. There's nothing kind of technically wrong with the way they're done. They're monsters. I just find them irritating. I just don't care for them.
Is it the whispery voice?
Oh, yeah, it's just annoying. And like that weird red goo out of his mouth. I was like, oh, gross. I just look at it and I go, oh, gross.
Do you know what, though? And I don't know if the listeners would have picked up on this because I don't think we've really had to see anything like it in series 1 of Doctor Who. I know that you're not the biggest fan of things that look, and this is a scientific word here, icky. Where, like, you're not a huge Venom fan. You're not a big fan of, like, zombie movies and stuff.
I don't like an icky.
I think that the Zygons are just a bit icky for you.
They're too icky for me. That's exactly it. It's icky. And I didn't like... There was a follow-up episode with the Zygons in series, I don't know, maybe 8.
The Zygon invasion and the Zygon inversion.
Yeah, and I was just like, go away. Gross. Like, I'm just like, gross.
I believe they were in series 9, yeah.
I hate to look at them. I hate anything that apologizes for them. I don't want to humanize them. I don't want to speak. I don't want to look at them. I don't want them near me. So, I mean, they're here. I'm making peace with it.
Welcome to Wholala, a podcast of peace and calmness.
What can I say? I'm prejudiced. It's not fair. It's an unfair criticism.
No, I think if you don't like something, you don't like it.
I just don't like it. It's the thing is they're ugly in a way that they're not camp villains.
Yeah, they're not camp.
They're not threatening villains. They are not interesting villains. I don't find their motives interesting. I don't know why they want to invade the planet. I don't know why they've chosen Earth.
Their planet got destroyed. Why. They said in the beginning of the Time War their planet was destroyed and they wanted a new planet to inhabit.
Okay, I wasn't watching.
I will say this. In an episode like this, one of my lows for it was that it felt like 2 very different stories. It felt like the Time War and the Dalek story was very different to the Zygon and the Elizabeth and Ethan story. And they were just 2 separate stories. And because they had to do them both in this one episode, I feel like they might not have done either of them justice. So much as I do like that they were there, I think that it could have been workshopped a bit better maybe on how they're incorporated into the story.
Let me give you some positive points because I've been really whinging. I'll give you a high. Cinema cameras, baby. It looks pretty good.
I know. There's some certain shots in this that I just got, like, there's a shot of Elizabeth when she's, like, just been knocked down and it's, like, a real close-up and you see, like, specks of dust floating around her. And, there are some shots in this that just look beautiful.
You know, that's so funny. That's one of my, I'm not kidding, that's one of my least favorite shots.
Really?
I think it's so weird how it's in suddenly slow motion. I'm like, why? It's like, it's really jarring. It was like, no, we're going to get into this. Some shots, it's time for a low. Some shots are dirt.
Wait, do you want to say you're high before we go into another low?
No, I don't. You pissed me right off. I don't like that shot. And some of these shots really are giving A-level film studies because, you know what? They were like, wouldn't it be so artsy if she was laid on the ground and there was a little... No, it wouldn't, because the pace is off now, because we were running around and we were enjoying the chase, and then it's slow motion. What? It's jarring. We were just running, and now we're lying.
I will say this, though. Chase, ? Like, when the Doctor and Elizabeth first run from the Zygon, and it's, like, not very far away. It's maybe, like, 20 paces away from them, and they kind of jog, holding hands, and hide behind this thing, and it's, like, somehow really far in the... I was like, this is an oddly paced chase at the best of times.
This was like, this really is an important note for me, is that you would have a stunning shot followed by such a janky shot. So I'll give a couple more examples specifically. Okay, amazing shot was the model TARDIS crashing through a wall, knocking into some Daleks, which are all practical. A little squid Dalek flies out of its casing.
I love it.
So nearly a perfect shot, but you can tell, because it's in slow motion, that they think they got away with it. They didn't. I noticed that the TARDIS has hit the wall and is now being slowed down. So you can see the TARDIS is slowing down. It's not moving consistently.
Oh, you mean like it hits the wall and then I see.
Because the next shot is of the TARDIS in space spinning.
I see.
So the implication is the TARDIS spun through, hit the Daleks, and ejected into space. But it obviously didn't because the two shots don't match. Okay, one complaint. Next is when the
cameras, baby, we love them.
Forget that point. It's gone. It's dead. That high's gone. Next complaint is the moment's like, let me show you, and it's like, what is this? Oh, it's real time. It's a projection. It's all around us, and they have this gorgeous like, oh, they're on Gallifrey. They can see the war around them, and all the doctors are like illuminated by this like floodlight, and they're in the war. Next shot is an ultra close up of maybe David Tennant's face on a green screen, and the rest of Gallifrey are a completely different angle behind him.
No, I'm with you on that one, but I don't think they were doing it with the intention of making it look like he was there. I think that was like to really emphasize that it's a projection, and you're like more. I think it's more to give the audience the feeling that they aren't there and they're like disjointed from the scene. So you get the wide view. I do agree with you. I actually hate that shot as well. I don't like that shot, but I think their thought behind it was to make it look like, to make the audience uncomfortable and aware that they're not really there. Like they're passing judgment on what to do when they're not actually there. I guess that's what they're going for.
Boo, bad take, bad take. It's a crap shot and you can say it. No, I don't know. I mean, I get it. I respect it. I think it's ugly. I don't like it. Maybe it's stylistic. For me, in the editing room, it's getting cut.
This episode, if you had your way, would be 19 minutes long. It'd be shorter than an episode of Wholala.
It'd be 19 minutes of gorgeous shots, though.
One thing that I think that the special did really, really well, in some obvious ways and some less obvious ways, is pull reference from the history of the show, maybe leaning a little bit more towards like New Who and the revival, but I still love how they peppered a lot of stuff in. Like when we're in the Black Archive, we pass a wall of all the passing companions and we see a photo of the Brigadier, obviously leaning towards Kate Stewart being his daughter. There's a lot of like little throwaway lines that are fun references. When we're with the War Council near the beginning of the episode, they say the High Council have called an emergency session. They have plans of their own, which is obviously a reference to David Tennant's final episode, where it was the first time we'd seen any of the Time War, and in that episode we followed the High Council. Funnily enough, in that episode there's a throwaway line where it says the Doctor has the moment, which then paid off in this episode where we finally got to see the Doctor with the moment. We found out what happened with that. There's also another fun little line. Kate, she throughout the episode is on the phone to someone called Malcolm. We never see who Malcolm is, but we're led to assume it's the same Malcolm from The Planet of the Dead, one of the other 2009 specials of David Tennant, whereas he was a unit scientist in that episode, and I just think that's like a fun little sort of throwaway.
I totally agree with you. I love the tie-ins. I'm really glad that they explained how this lines up with The End of Time, the David Tennant specials, because in that one, it is all about a plan the Time Lords have to return that's going to destroy Earth in the process, because the Time Lords have gone a bit insane and power mad. So I'm glad it kind of refers to that, how there's kind of two plans happening at once, and it all still ties together. And also, I totally agree with you on the references, the kind of like pinboards in the Black Archive, and just those little shots of classic companions was really nice, just so that those people did get some screen time in the 50th is really nice.
Yeah. Although one thing that did bug me when I was watching that is so many of the photos, and this is just me being like super nerd, like are impossible shots to get. So there's a picture of Rose and a unit soldier, but from a parallel world. And there's a picture of Amy and Rory, but it's when they're in the TARDIS, in the Doctor's wife. And it's like, I don't think UNIT could get photos from these opportunities, but that's just me being nerd. It's a really fun reference.
Yeah, that is a very good point, and I didn't consider that. Thanks for ruining that for me. No, I'm kidding. But that is a very good point. Let me bring in a high. Two highs, actually. I'm going to talk about the cast.
Treating us.
Matt Smith is well into his groove at this point, and I really feel that every Doctor is at their best in their last series. And by the time they've really been doing it for a few years or a few series, I mean, with the exception of people who've only done for one, sadly, they really are they're in their thing. They know what they're doing. They know the character inside out. They've really perfected the mannerisms, and it's become very natural for them. And you can see they've become much more confident in their performance. And typically they stop exploring, I think, so much with the portrayal, and they kind of like, they've really fallen into it and made it feel very natural for them. And I think you really see that with Matt Smith. There was a point, I think, earlier on where the 11th Doctor, definitely in his first episodes, he's a bit more like, oh, mate. Do you know what I mean? He speaks a little bit more like,
The football episode for me, I think it was the Lodger. Like, that was a bit too much where they were like, let's just let Matt Smith play. And, like, I think he was playing it a lot more like Matt Smith. And I think he then really got... For me, I think Purple Coat Series 7B Doctor, I prefer over the Tweed Series 5 to 7 Doctor.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, and that's what I mean. And then in addition to that, I want to say John Hurt, baby. John Hurt is, I mean, honestly, what a casting. What a gift that they were able to get him for this. I mean, if you can't get Christopher Eccleston, this is not a bad substitute to get John Hurt. I mean, to actually just get a legend of film and TV. And say, John Hurt was one of the Doctors. You can get away with that. That's fine. Like, you're good. That is okay. That was phenomenal.
I know. I do, in my heart of hearts, I think I still wish that they had asked Paul McGann to come back and just play the role the War Doctor played. However, if you are going to bring a secret Doctor into the show, you have to do it with an actor like John Hurt. He was incredible. He really sold it. We're so lucky that we got, like, the Big Finish stories with the War Doctor as well. Like, he really... Apparently, he jumped at the chance. Like, when he was asked, he was like, yep, absolutely, it's Doctor, I'll do it. Like, that's amazing.
A massive high that we need to talk about is Tom Baker's inclusion at the end as the curator. This was a true twist. Right when you think all the action's done, you hear this incredibly distinctive booming voice, and it's our boy Tom. And what a lovely inclusion.
It was so good.
He plays such a wonderful character. There's such a great mystery wrapped around his presence there as well. Whether the curator is just a lookalike, someone who's familiar with the Doctor, if he is a future version of the Doctor, or indeed a past version of the Doctor. So lovely to have him on.
Amazing. I remember hearing rumours at the time that Tom Baker was coming back and that they were going to de-age him, which I guess they kind of did in that wide shot at the end with all the Doctors. They did de-age them, or composite on the younger faces. But when I heard him go, I'd rather think you might, I was like, oh my God, it's Tom Baker. And it was such, like you said, there was so much mystery around like who he was. I also think it's quite fitting, for today, when 11 says, I never forget a face, and then the curator goes, I know you don't. And in years to come, you might find yourself revisiting a few, but just the old favourites, eh? And now... in the era, David Tennant's coming back, baby.
It's such a powerful little performance as well. There's something he said like, who knows? And then he pulls this like almost like frightened little face where he like bites his finger or something. And then he's like, where is Gallifrey? Lost. Shh. And then, I don't know. It's just so good. He gives me chills. It's so like erratic and engaging. And I don't know. I do love it. It's very special. May I go low?
When we go high, we must go low.
I've got a few complaints. David Tennant's hair.
Oh my God. I mean,
now,
like number one complaint.
Now, I assumed that he had some kind of aggressively receded hairline at this point, and perhaps it was just not possible that they could style his hair. However, it's now been 10 years. And it turns out they can.
They're literally doing it now in the 60th.
They're doing it right now. They're doing it right now for Red Nose Day. So I'm like, whose decision was it to give him this floppy front fringe that he never had in the show, and I think ages him quite badly as well?
I think it ages him because it had also only been, 4 years after he finished Doctor Who to filming this. Like, it really wasn't a huge stretch of time. So if they had, and apparently, I'm sure they had multiple costumes in, but apparently, one of the suits he wore was one that he kept from his series. He still fit into it. He was in exactly the same shape. And I agree with you that you'd be led to believe his hairline or something completely changed. But no, it's baffling. I'm sure they don't have the same hair and makeup team that they had when he was on the show. I'm certain of that. But you just have to look at a couple of reference pictures, because his hair, I'll say this, his hair did change quite a lot in his tenure. When he was in the Christmas Invasion, it was completely different to series 2, which was different to series 3, but the spiky hair, especially for this point in his timeline, because I think this is meant to be just before his final episode, this is his secret adventure he had just before his final episode. We were fully in Spike Town, baby. We wouldn't, I don't know what they were thinking here.
Very strange, very strange.
One thing, and I think this might be a little bit controversial. I see why they did it, but I am not a fan of them using the original title sequence from William Hartnell's era for this special.
Wow.
Maybe I'm just a party of one. I don't know, but I was so excited to see a huge, big, bombastic, like celebratory anniversary title sequence, which I do get why they didn't do, but I was like excited, like, oh, I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the title sequence for the anniversary. And it was like, it wasn't even like the full thing. It was like 15 seconds that fade out of William Hartnell's sequence. I did like they then recreated the first ever shot of black and white with the policeman. That was fun. But not a fan. I wish they'd done something else.
For me, it was a high. I don't think there's anything else they could have done 50 years on at like almost the same time. Was it shown at the same time?
I think it was. I think they literally like aired it on the same day at the same time.
Wasn't it like at 5 something? It wasn't at 7 o'clock, was it? It was at a weird time.
Yeah, I think they matched up the time. Yeah.
So they, I think, had to repeat the original titles exactly 50 years later around the world with the same music. I think that was the right call. But I get what you mean. Maybe a colorized version or a version that's been like, rendered for widescreen or something instead might be nicer.
Yeah, that could, maybe the widescreen. I get like if you're going to do it, like not to make it color or something. But I think, maybe, I don't know. I think maybe in that instance, I'd hyped myself up for something that then didn't happen. So now I'm just going to be eternally bitter that it didn't play out like I thought it would in my head.
I think what you're fair to say is that the closing titles could have had a lot more oomph. That is a very Doctor Who Confidential-esque kind of rendering of the theme that does nothing for me. And that would have been a great... I mean, given, like, if you think about the trailers... A real high, by the way, let me throw that in. That's one I forgot to say. The trailers, good Lord, the trailers were incredible.
Were
I mean, flawless. Actually, not quite true. Almost flawless, except they have Matt Smith in a wig.
Oh my God. Yeah, I literally looked at the trailer today before we recorded this, and the wig is just so
The wig
obvious.
is wigging. The wig is wigging.
The wig is wigging.
It is not sat nicely on his head. But there's this great trailer music in that, and that has such an oomph to it. It was made by a group called Tins and Strings, and I've been looking for the original copy of that theme forever and ever and ever, and it does not exist. A lot of copies exist on YouTube which are cleaned up. There is no such original copy anywhere, which is such a shame because I would love to hear it in its full glory.
It was so good. That the bit when it fades from black and white to color in the trailer and it goes like, and it like really goes into like
Amazing.
belting the theme tune. So good.
That with Matt Smith's narration, because Matt Smith does have an incredible voice, and like I say, I think he's really come into the character at this point in time. It's intense. It's good. I remember like I was in sixth form at the time. I remember like being in the common room with my headphones in, replaying the trailer. Cool kid. Yeah.
One final little low from me was a high and a low, I guess. I love that they got Billie Piper back. Any chance that I can see Billie Piper on screen, especially in Doctor Who, I am thrilled. But I do feel we were robbed of a Rose Tyler return. I think people had kind of gotten to the point where they were like, oh, I don't want to rely on Rose too much. So I completely see what they did. And I think it was clever to bring her back and like show the element of Bad Wolf. However, I don't really get why they did it. I don't get why she was dressed like that. She's like, oh, I think I'm Rose Tyler. Oh no, I'm the Bad Wolf. Are you afraid of the big bad wolf? And it's like, no, that isn't someone that you would have like chosen to project to the Doctor. Also, I will forever and eternally see the Bad Wolf in like long, straight blonde hair, a punky fish, red like hoodie. Like I think that would have given me the fan service I needed if she, I mean obviously it had been by that point like the better part of 10 years, so she wouldn't have looked like she did in 2005, but I just feel like that was a bit of a stretch, and it was just I feel robbed that we didn't get any proper scenes of Billy and David. Like genuinely one of my favourite shots in the episode, not because it's like beautifully filmed or anything, it's when John Hurt goes, oh, Bad Wolf girl, I could kiss you, and then there's a shot of Ten with the Bad Wolf behind him, and Ten's like, I'm sorry, did you just say Bad Wolf?
Which he doesn't probe any further,
just moves on. But in that one shot, and I don't think this is intentional, but it's so funny to me, his hair is super spiky, like really like 10th Doctor spiky, and then they cut away and then they cut back to him and it's flat again, and everyone's like, it's Rose, but no, it's just bad continuity. But I just feel robbed. I want more Rose.
It's funny, I will say as well, just on that continuity issue, I remember hearing that the barn set that they film in is really, really hot because it's got lights all the way out around the edge of it, because it's not outdoors, it's an indoor set. So to make it look like there is strong desert sunlight, they are streaming these big hot lights all around the outside. And I remember I was reading something, I don't know if it was an article years ago by Stephen Moffat, but they were talking about the making of, and he said like, oh yeah, it was unbelievably hot in there. And also you've got everyone inside this barn wearing full coats, so they are like sweating. And there are some shots you can see that poor John Hurt, who is in his 80s at this point, you can see he's sweaty. Like I mean, I'm sure they are blotting him in between, but the poor guy, I mean, his hair is wet in some shots if you look. And I'm not surprised that David's hair was flopping. I think everyone in there was really on the edge of heat stroke. And I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, if like whoever was in charge of continuity that day was like, it is hot, we need to wrap, I want to get off set, I'm not doing a retake.
We are getting this done.
We're getting this done and we're getting lunch. I have told you already that this story had, I mean, this was a big deal for me. This was a huge big deal for me because this was like, I think one of the hottest moments to be a Doctor Who fan of all time. It's coming up again, I fear, with the 60th, and maybe it just will come up every 10 years for us. But, you know, I mean, at the time that this came out, it had such an impact on me that I based part of my RA level on drawing a comic strip, like a huge version of it, like a, you know, big version. Of basically the ending scene where all the doctors come back. Sad.
Do you have like a copy of this somewhere? This is not something I've seen.
Somewhere I will, but it's literally got the words on it as well. Like it's done like a comic strip. It's all in black and white. I drew all the frames individually. It's a bit where like it's literally got the script from that part with like frozen exactly like a painting, and it's all written on there. So I love
it. I also think that we literally had the same life when I was in textiles in year 8. You had to make a little like a satchel, like a little bag, and then you got given fabric pens, and I drew River Song's diary on one side and then wrote, "Do you trust me?" And then she was like, "No, but where's the fun in that?" I think like that quote from Time of Angels, like we were the same person.
Disgusting. Put us down.
But adorable.
Kind of. And then anyway, off that point, I think the reason I've been quite apologetic for this episode is that, you know, I would think about this episode. I think I was just so riding on the high of it that I didn't stop to think, you know, is there any room for the potential this wasn't good? No, not at all. And so I think I filled the gaps with my own explanations, my own theories, my own like time on Reddit. I think I just kind of filled the gaps and satisfied myself with the gaps that I filled. Watching it again, though, I've realized that a lot of these things that I kind of have made for myself, you know, headcanon, if you will, aren't there. It's not in the literature. It is not in the original source. And I've kind of filled gaps that aren't filled. And there's actually quite a lot of like gaping holes in this story. And the reason I really noticed it as well is I was watching it with my flatmate who kind of turned to me and said, "Sorry, wait, when he says this, does he mean?" And I was like, you know, I actually don't know. And like, so when he says, no, what? And I was like, yeah, it's kind of resolved next series, but not really. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, no.
I think that this story, I mean, I touched on it before, but I think it's so big and it dealt with so many things like the Zygon plot and then this one, that a lot of later Doctor Who episodes tied up loose ends, but you can't have like a one-off special do that because, you know, the Zygon invasion, Zygon inversion, that sort of finishes the story of the Zygons. You then later look in Heaven Sent, Hell Bent, that kind of finishes the story of like Gallifrey and the Time Lords. And in the Time of the Doctor, you find out about finding Gallifrey. Like there was a lot of plot points that were left open to the point where they needed to conclude them, but didn't do it in that episode. And I think that is something that they should have avoided.
That's fine. I'm happy with things being left open-ended that later eventually we came back to. I have some specific qualms.
Go on, give me some qualms. Go through.
Oh my God. I mean, probably explained. How did Elizabeth get the painting? Right.
Yeah.
See, if you don't know now. No. No. Don't do this. Don't do this. No.
No. All I was going to say is because there's two different questions. Because Elizabeth got the painting because the Zygons brought the paintings. The Zygons invaded Earth in the Elizabethan era and brought the paintings. That's how she had them.
Why did the Zygons
The Zygons put themselves into the paintings and then she had them. However, how did she get the specific painting of Gallifrey? That's what I would want to know.
Okay. Whatever, there's an answer. Okay, whatever. I didn't get that first go. There we are. Maybe I wasn't listening. I've watched it about 15 times, but yeah, fine. Maybe I wasn't listening. The Doctors enter the painting to get to the Black Archive. How? They're in the TARDIS with a stasis cube. How do they enter the painting?
That's fair. I won't argue that. I know that like their explanation in the episode is like, oh well, we'll trap ourselves in the stasis cube, but I don't then see how that puts them in a painting that they're nowhere
put them
near.
in that painting
Doesn't exist. Yeah, no, that I don't have an explanation for.
I don't get that. So then when they're inside the painting, earlier in the episode, the War Doctor says, "Why are you aiming your sonic screwdrivers at them? That's a scientific instrument, not a water pistol." We go inside the painting, and the War Doctor joins them in aiming the sonic screwdriver like a water pistol. And the sonic screwdriver propels a Dalek backwards into, I guess, a wall. We don't really see what it hits.
It hits the painting. Okay. It hits the interior of the painting and smashes through the painting.
Right. So 2 questions. What did it hit? Did it hit a
You
painter?
see a frame in the wide shot. You see like a floating frame, and it like goes into the frame and like breaks the glass of the painting, which is how they then get through.
Okay, it hits the frame. How does sonic screwdrivers repel a Dalek?
Oh, I wish I could agree with you on this, but in the Asylum of the Daleks, you saw the 11th Doctor go in the Dalek's head and go, like, I'm not looking for self-destruct here, I'm looking for reverse. Like, they probably just 3 of them reversed, like, because it's just a travelling machine. They probably just reversed it.
Okay, sure. And then my next question...
I'm not trying to piss you off with these answers, I just...
My next question. Actually, no, my next qualm. All the Doctors turn up at the end. Okay, to cross the time streams. Why? Why did all the Doctors have to come? Because the issue was not that there weren't enough Doctors. The issue was that the calculations weren't done to use the stasis cube to freeze a whole planet. So the calculations are done by the time the 11th Doctor is using his TARDIS. So the 11th Doctor has the finished calculations. Why do we need... I have no issue with it. It's a sick scene. Why do all the Doctors have to come? And how can they come?
I mean,
because a Doctor's not meant to be able to cross their own time streams, and it's meant to be a time-locked event.
Okay, I know I'm playing... I promise you I'm not trying to play devil's advocate. Again, this isn't explained. My assumption as the viewer was that the 11th Doctor had done the calculations and knew he'd need a certain amount of TARDISes. Because if you look, he says like all 13 of them are here, but there are way more than 13 TARDISes. So my assumption, but again, it isn't told explicitly in the episode, is that he knew that you'd need a certain amount of TARDISes to pull it off. So they brought all of them back. Again, in the aspect of like plot holes with Stephen Moffat, like how would he send a message to his previous selves? How did the first Doctor know about this calculation? Because this problem wasn't a problem until the War Doctor. So how could you then get the first Doctor to start the calculations? I assumed because there was a line with the 10th Doctor where he said like, we shouldn't even be here, like something's let us in, this should be time locked. And the moment had made a comment before saying how she was letting people into the time lock. It is a bit of a stretch to be like this weapon.
I think the answer to the question, how do they get in? The answer is that the moment is allowing them in, is the answer.
I guess. But I still don't know how the 11th Doctor was meant to like, how the first Doctor knew about these calculations that weren't going to exist until his, I guess, 9th incarnation. The War Doctor's his 9th incarnation.
Yeah, and I guess you could say like, oh, maybe they sent, a coded message that, was implanted in the TARDIS, but he never knew what he was calculating until now. Something like that. I can I can get with that. But then with needing that exact number of TARDISes, the 11th Doctor believes it is their last life and believes that right up until they get a new cycle from the Time Lords. So wasn't aware that the 12th Doctor was coming. So the number of TARDISes is irrelevant, surely. Or at least they didn't need... Or they didn't think they needed all of them.
That's a good point.
Unless just the more the merrier. But then in that case, why not more than 12? Why only 12? Why didn't they all come? Why do we have 50 Doctors? So there was a few... That was another thing.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think it's just have a sick scene.
It was a sick scene. I have a few more, but look, listen, before I get into that as well, I'm going to come up with some suggestions as well for things that maybe could have changed, with time permitting, that might have helped explain some of this. Now, the Doctor sees the Zygons and recognizes what a stasis cube is. So Time Lords have an awareness of stasis cubes. Like, that's not a new technology to them. My question then is, why didn't the Time Lords think to try using a stasis cube until it was seen in this context? Is it because they thought it was impossible to use it on a whole planet and only the Doctor is crazy enough to try?
I think because the line they put in the episode, it's like, it's impossible, the calculations alone would take years. And for them, they're like, none of us have like, we don't have the time to make those calculations. This is probably the last day of the war. But then that begs the question, well, how did the Doctor make the time? But there you go.
Yeah, because they're Time Lords, right? Like, they can leave the war, hide out somewhere for 1,000 years with many lives. Just send one guy who runs the calculations on his own.
But the Time War was time locked, and the moment didn't want to let other Gallifreyans out.
Okay, yeah, all right. You know what? I'll actually accept that. I'll actually accept that as an explanation. I actually will accept that. I'll take that. You know what, Sam? I'll take it. I'll take that one. Give that girl a coconut. All right, we fixed one. Next problem. This one's not so hard to get your head around. Now, Gallifrey is frozen in a single instant of time in a pocket universe. Immediately in the Christmas special, they're unfrozen again. Because if you are frozen in an instant of time, you can't speak, you can't communicate, you can't send a message, you certainly can't send a new regeneration cycle. And when we see them again in Hellbent, they've unfrozen and time has passed. So I guess not too hard to work out, how do Time Lords unfreeze themselves. Like, well, they're Time Lords, they're probably pretty good at that. But that, again, it's never explained. And that was the thing my flatmate went, wait, what? Like, they're frozen, like, how are they ever going to get out? And it was like, good question. So that's never really explained. They just did. That's annoying. So, I mean, on some level, you kind of have to just enjoy it for the romp. And it is a visual spectacle. And it is kind of a fun ride. And the characterization is fun. Seeing the Doctors rip off each other is fun. And you can follow the tone of what's happening. Like it's, simple in the sense that the Doctor meets themselves and they get the chance to do a do-over on one of the worst days of their life and save a planet instead of destroy it. In that sense, it's quite easy to kind of grasp what's happened. The kind of how and why is tricky.
And I will say, like, especially from our perspective, having just watched the entirety of Series 1 and then jumping straight to this, my goodness, this CGI, the camera, like that shot of Gallifrey where you first see Gallifrey and the Daleks are shooting, it goes like, da-da, like that Dalek song.
Yeah, incredible.
Oh, so
absolutely
good.
Incredible. I have seen the behind the scenes. It was done by a production company called Milk VFX, and I think they've since been absorbed into either a different production company or they've changed their name. But I remember watching the kind of VFX breakdowns back in day and being absolutely dazzled by it. And as well, Milk VFX, I think, worked on later series. They also worked on the time of the Doctor after this. Was that the only episode after this, before Matt Smith?
Yeah, it was Name of the Doctor before. It was a trilogy. It was Name of the Doctor, Day of the Doctor, and Time of the Doctor, with a special little Night of the Doctor in there somewhere.
And again, like, stunning episode. Like, again, I think this was probably the beginning of some really beautiful visual effects in Doctor Who. And like cinema quality in that it was literally shown in cinemas and I think does hold up. So apart from a few jarring shots, like on the whole, it's a beautiful episode. And as negative as I've been, a lot of shots really, really hold up.
And I love as well, I mean, like, I know you love this as well, how Murray Gold uses themes and interpolations of different episode. So like when we're first in Elizabeth in England and we get like a very big swelling 10th Doctor's theme before we see his TARDIS, like I remember watching that as a kid and hearing the and it just chills. I was like he's back, baby.
I can't believe I forgot to mention soundtrack as a high earlier, because there's a few particular songs which, I'm not kidding, year after year after year after year, it's been a decade now, have ranked somewhere in the top 10, 20 of my most listened. One of them is always It's Him, which is the opening song. It's actually different to the one that's aired. So on It's Him, there's an unreleased track at the very beginning of it. And on the aired version, they play Slitheen from Series 1. And anyway, the soundtrack throughout is incredible. You're right. We get a few more variants of the 10th Doctor's theme. We get a few variants of the Doomsday theme hidden in there as well. We get a hell of an edition of the Majestic Tale of a Madman in a Box as well for the ending, which is I think probably the best ever Doctor's theme, best ever
so
Doctor's
good.
hero theme. Just so good. So as I say, a few issues potentially with the story. In my head, I've kind of fixed it. And I think this is how a lot of people would read it anyway, or at least the really hardcore fans like us. I think in the original timeline, the Doctor did burn Gallifrey, so that decision hasn't changed. And this is a new timeline with the bad wolf interfering, which allows a new option. Now, my theory is that the reason we see the form of the Bad Wolf is not because the moment chose it, but also because Rose, as the Bad Wolf, interfered with the Time War. Because the Bad Wolf has a line at the end of Series 1 where they say the Time War ends. I choose to believe that the Bad Wolf interfered with events and created a second timeline where the Doctor didn't have to kill everyone.
I like that. I think that's fun.
That's my decision. That's my choice.
As new showrunner, that's your new headcanon.
Yes, because the moment has a conscience, but not necessarily the same kind of consciousness that we see in the show. And I would argue that that comes from the Bad Wolf's tampering, the entity. And that's why we see it, and the eyes glow, and that potentially, the Bad Wolf is there and present and changing things. And I wonder even then when we see things like the Bad Wolf trying to persuade the Doctor not to go ahead with doing it and trying to show them a version of the future that helps them think of an alternative to using the moment, whether that is actually more the Bad Wolf interfering than it is the moment doing that, and whether it's even beyond the moment scope to open up new windows into different parts of time, and maybe that's all the Bad Wolf. So that's where my head goes into why we see that.
I can see that. I mean, the Bad Wolf, she said that she took the words and scattered them throughout time and space, and there you go.
Yeah. My other kind of correction that goes on in my head is that there's a lot that's happening in the Time War that we don't see. So I think the Time War has to be horrible because we hear descriptions at other parts of the series, Doctor Who.
The Nightmare Child.
The Nightmare Child, right? Yeah, like
the Gates of Elysium.
Yeah, the Davros flies into the mouth of the Nightmare Child and is devoured, and it's at the heart of the war, people being killed and brought back to life just to die again. So it's meant to be like the Doctor has seen things that are so disturbing that it has to end, because like every second that it doesn't, it is just like it's like literally living hell. And I think what we actually end up seeing is kind of like it's Star Wars stuff, right? It's traditional warfare, it's laser beams. It's not that bad. Well, it's
completely
bad.
Agree.
It's not like
And I think that what they really miss a trick on here that they had already delved into a bit is the Doctor's role in the Time War, and just why I don't think they convincingly said why, and maybe this is just because John Hurt is such a lovable guy, but they didn't convincingly give me a reason as to why the Doctor ignores and tries to forget that he has that regeneration, because I know that the explanation they give in the episode is like, oh, he had to make the decision to kill all the Time Lords, and that's why I don't consider him the Doctor, because he didn't help people. David Tennant in previous episodes has said, like, I think it was to Jenny or to Donna in the Doctor's Daughter, has said, like, killing, it's like an infection, and I was good at it, but I got worse, I got clever, I would convince people to end their own lives. And like, I think that's what it might have been too horrible to see on screen, but that's kind of what the vibe they give you in this episode is, that the War Doctor was just fighting in the war and was so tired, just needed it to end because war is awful. But like, there are so many like war atrocities, like even the Master who loves chaos and war was scared of this, and we know it in canon that the Master then fled and made themselves human just so the Time Lords couldn't find him, because he was dead and the Time Lords brought him back to life in order to fight in this war that scarred him so bad he made himself human so they'd forget who he was just to get away from this. Like, I completely agree. I think they really could have lent into that more.
I think it's tricky, right? Because almost you shouldn't touch the Time War because of exactly this reason, that it is kind of meant to be too horrible to really be seen on screen for the show it is. Like, I almost kind of would love to see Torchwood do the Time War, because it'd probably be a lot closer. Yeah, I don't know. I think like what we see is pretty like pew pew warfare.
There could be an entire series in of itself called the Time War.
It could have been a series. Like, it could have been it could have been the 50th series could have been this. And it's a shame that it feels nearly done and not quite, and it just needs a bit longer to tell this story, maybe. Well, look, with all the highs and lows, the plot and the lack of plot, we do manage to claw a couple of camp moments. So, Alasdair, are you ready to play the first episode of Camp or Damp of Season 2? Woo! Yeah, I'm ready.
Alasdair, venom sacs in the tongue, kissy kissy, camp or damp?
Ew, damp, no, gross.
I imagine it was very damp. Wet, even.
You did make me realise why I don't like this so much. It's the ickiness. I'm not into it. No, damp.
Oh, the scene as well with Kate where she's like slow-mo CGIs into his eye, like when she like splurts up the damp. Yet another Fez, camp or damp.
Oh my lord. It's tricky because the Fez became almost emblematic of a certain part of Tumblr around that time, of which I was probably part.
Fez and a bow tie.
And I honestly feel that, that part of the Who community probably did damage for us in a way that we still haven't truly recovered from.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to say damp, unfortunately.
I know. I feel like Series 7B Doctor, he'd grown up. He'd grown old, but no, he still loves his Fezes. I also love, there's a line, I think Clara says, like, one day you can just walk past a Fez, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least on screen, I don't think he ever wore a Fez with Clara. I don't think.
No. So this must have happened off screen.
Many a Fez adventure. And finally, the moment / Bad Wolf / Rose Tyler / the interface is hot. Well, I do my best. The return of Billie Piper, camp or damp.
The moment is quite camp.
She is camp.
She is camp. I tell you, let me be very specific about what's camp. It's the outfit camp with the rips and the weird bohemian, like, shaggy chic thing.
Yeah.
Is that camp?
I say no. I just think her attitude is camp.
The performance is camp. Tell you what, very specifically what's camp is we get the return of the Billie Piper lisp, and that is that's camp.
That's gone back round to being damp and then back to camp.
Story of your life, eh, Doctor? No,
if I ever develop an ego, you've got the job. That's camp.
That's camp.
Would you like a couple of fun facts about this episode, Alasdair?
Yes, please.
So, during their incarceration in the Tower of London, the 11th Doctor carves the base code for the vortex manipulator into the wall of the Tower of London. The base code is 171-623-1169, which is actually the exact time and date of the airing of the first episode of Doctor Who, which was 16 minutes past 5 in the afternoon on the 23rd of the 11th, 1963.
That is very cute. I love that a lot. I do love that.
Isn't that such a fun little nod?
That is really, really sweet.
One thing that's interesting is that Christopher Eccleston actually took several meetings with showrunner Stephen Moffat regarding the potential reprise of his role as the Ninth Doctor. One of the original scripts was the 10th and 11th Doctors going back in time and confronting the Ninth Doctor about the events of the Time War. But he ultimately had to drop out due to scheduling issues and there not being a script ready. He also wanted our friend Joe Ahern to direct. He directed loads of episodes in Series 1, as he felt that he was the best director of his season, but in the end an agreement couldn't be reached, which is why he decided not to return.
Interesting. First of all, let's be very clear. Joe Ahern, not a personal friend. We're just fans.
I almost said friend of the pod, and then I was like, no, I won't say that.
Friend of the pod.
A friend. I feel like I know so much about him. We've just spent so long talking about his direction.
We did. I didn't know that the talks got that far. I assumed it was literally like a flat, like, fuck it off. I really thought it was just a no.
Exactly. And I have great respect for Stephen Moffat because another fact is the reason that the War Doctor's regeneration was only shown half complete is because after Christopher Eccleston declined to return, Stephen Moffat wanted to respect his decisions on the grounds that making it appear that an actor was in something they did not want to be in without their consent would be unethical, which I have a lot of respect for him doing. I think it was a really fun nod to like start to see him regenerate into Christopher Eccleston, but I think that was definitely the right way to go about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well because this is not far from the time that we began to see things like Carrie Fisher recreated in Rogue One and the kind of debates that came up around that. In fact, 2 actors were brought back in Rogue One, Peter Cushing's as well. And that was in 2016.
I believe so, yeah, December 2016.
So not far before that. I mean, obviously different reasons, but, interesting, from an ethical standpoint.
And one final little fun nod that they have to Doctor Who's past. As Clara is leaving Coal Hill School on her motorbike, she passes a clock which shows 5:16 in the afternoon, the same time the first episode of Doctor Who aired.
Oh, that is nice. Yeah, funny time for it to be on.
I know, right? Weird time. But I do remember, you've sort of unlocked that memory in my head that they aired this special at an odd time in the afternoon because they wanted it to be at the exact same time.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll do that again this year.
I doubt it, if I'm honest. I think Russell cares more about the prime time slot than it being respectful. I also think the 50th anniversary is a different thing to a 60th anniversary. I think like what's it called, a bicentennial?
Yeah, this team under Rusty Davies and Bad Wolf, they feel the sort to put it on at prime time and do a special tweet at 5:16.
Exactly. We'll have a pre-show.
Yes, a little character options announcement of 5:16 for the fans.
Another thing that came out of the 50th anniversary for Big Finish, because they always do things for anniversaries, was The Light at the End, which was the multi-Doctor story with all the classic Doctors. It featured Tom Baker, Peter Davidson, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, and Paul McGann in a battle with the Master, and that was an amazing sort of amalgamation of that was the multi-Doctor event that we wanted for the 50th anniversary special, but they, at least at the time, didn't feel they could do because all the actors had aged out of their role. We then saw her from The Power of the Doctor, just how you could get around that, but that's a story for... Well, it's a story for already told.
I know. It's interesting, isn't it?
Well, thank you, Alasdair, for coming back with me to 2013 and rewatching The Day of the Doctor. I'm sorry there were so many issues with it for you.
Yeah, no, it's, don't worry about me. I maybe I thought it would achieve a lot more than it did. No, it was a real celebration for me. Like, that weekend I spent at the XL Centre, like being around other Who fans and seeing Matt Smith up close on the stage. I was like in the third row. Stephen
that would have been
Moffat was
amazing.
there. Jenna Coleman was there. It was so surreal. I felt so close to it, and it felt like it was everyone's business. The Doctor Who 50th anniversary. It felt huge at that time, and I do have very, very fond memories of it. It felt cinematic back then.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this revisit back to 2013 for the 50th anniversary. As always, please keep the conversation going. You can reach out to us on our Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, all of which are at Wholala Pod. And you can also rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, also at Wholala Pod. Let us know what you think. What did you think of The Day of the Doctor? Does it still hold up today? Did you love it when it was on? What did you have for breakfast? There's so many questions.
Did you see it screened at the XL, and was it like the Endgame cinema experience? I desperately need to know.
We need to know. And on that note, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We are hard at work developing a packed season 2 for you, and we'd love to hear from you. Your ideas, what you'd like us to talk about, people we should speak to, do let us know at Wholala Pod on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok. Hit us up.
Hit us up. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.